Dai.
So, thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. Thanks for the kind invitation. And well, if you are here in this symposium, I should probably not tell you what a brain-computer interface is, but perhaps I can provide a very general definition. So, a brain-computer interface, or a BCI, is a system that aims to recognize mental intentions and translate them into actions. So that means that a BCI can be used to better understand the relationships between behavior and brain activity, but it can also be used to develop new therapeutics based on neurofeedback in order to counteract the effects of certain neural diseases. And of course, it can be used also to translate brain activity in order to control external devices, like, for example, some robotic arms, just directly by thoughts. So the question is, even if it's so impressive, despite the promises that we have observed in the last decades, why BCI are not used in our daily life? Why we cannot find BCI in every hospital? Well, the answer is quite straightforward. If you think about it, that actually BCI are not reliable. Now, I should be able to change the slide in that way. And when I say that they are not reliable, I don't mean that they never work, but I simply want to mean that in some cases there is a large inter-subject variability of the performance. Performance that can be quantified as the number of times that you are able, that the system is actually able to recognize your mental state and your mental intentions. So this is a nice review that shows that even in a very simple paradigm, so this is a motor imagery-based one-dimensional cursor task in which we have to hit the target, control the trajectory of the cursor to hit the target. You can see that the performance, the accuracy, is highly variable across subjects. So, of course, you can have few subjects that perform very well, but the large part of the subject, as you can see from the right part of the picture, perform in average between 60 and 70%. So it means that between 3 and 4 times over 10, the system is not able to recognize the mental intention, so you are not able to control the BCI, and this, of course, have critical consequences for the overall usability of BCI. So in order to solve this issue, there has been, let's say, a very multidisciplinary effort in the last decade. And for example, the neuroscience community has largely focused on psychological factors, or the fact that actually subjects have to learn how to use BCI. So there are some neural processing behind that allows people to understand how they have to modulate their brain activity in order to have an efficient control of the BCI. The signal processing community have worked a lot in order to improve the quality of the brain signal that has been acquired. The machine learning community, on the other hand, have worked in trying to optimize the classification algorithm in order to better separate the different brain signals. So despite the relatively good improvement of performance, we are still not at that level of performance that will allow BCI to be really usable for everyone. And one thing that perhaps we might think about is that actually the kind of features that we are considering so far are rather crude measurements. So the large part of BCI used power spectrum density estimated from EEG signals. So, and if you think about it, it's a really oversimplification of the real phenomenon. On the other hand, we can think about or try to put more effort in order to enrich the feature space. On the one hand, for example, you can think about including new neuroimaging modalities that can capture multiple spatial and temporal properties of brain activity. So not only EEG, but we can, for example, integrate MEG or fMRI data. On the other hand, you can think about including different type of features, not only activity, but other kind of metrics or measurements that are related to the connectivity or the way different regions are interacting from a network perspective. So in the next slide, I would like really to focus on and to show the results that we have obtained so far in these two lines of research. And first of all, let me show you the experimental paradigm that we are considering for this study. We are basically focused on a very simple DCI setting, which is a motor imagery based or hand motor imagery based BCI, in order to the subject again has to control to modulate the brain activity in order to hit the target. And notably, here we are performing simultaneous EEG and MEG recording. So the subject is wearing an EEG cap, and at the same time, MEG signals have been acquired. So basically, MEG, perhaps a large part of you already know, but MEG can be split in two kinds of signals. You have the signals from the magnetometers and the signal for the gradiometers. So basically, in this, the theoretical framework that we wanted to use is to try to integrate the information from these three kind of signals. That is to say, EEG, magnetometer signal, and gradiometer signals. And in this study, we just take simple features like power spectrum density of the beta and alpha frequency bands, and we extracted we perform a linear discriminant analysis in order to classify the mental state according to each single modality. That is to say, we are able to obtain for each single modality a posterior probability, and we decided to merge this information by performing, in this case, a very simple linear combination that allows us to have a look and to normalize the contribution of each single modality in performing the overall classification. And what you can see is that actually the results were quite encouraging, because by the overall performance that we obtained by performing the classification offline was significantly higher as compared to the performance that we achieved with single modalities. And you can see that this increment of performance is also quite stable regardless of the number of features that we have considered. Now, in this case, as I told you before, for this study, we consider a very simple features like power spectrum density, but actually that could be interesting to use other kind of features, of course. But one advantage of the previous study is that because we actually design a specific fusion algorithm that consider each single modality, we can look back to the contribution of each modality to the overall performance. And you can see that each pie diagram here is for a different subject. Here we have considered 15 subjects. So you might have some subjects for which EEG is not relevant at all for the improvement of performance, while other subjects really need the EEG to control the device. So this just confirmed that actually we are different, and if for different reasons, this might be an interesting approach in order to improve performance, taking the best from each modality in order to have a better performance. Now, as I told you before, we might want to consider different kind of features that are not only related to activity, but also to the way different regions are interacting from a network perspective. And we can model this network as a graph, which is composed by different nodes and different links, and we can extract other kind of metrics, like, for example, the node degree. That is, for each node, for each electrode, the number of links that he has in the network. And actually, this is a study that we performed recently. We included this kind of features, and these are the results that we obtained when we estimated and constructed EEG brain networks in the beta frequency band by considering very well-known and established connectivity measurements. You have on the left hand spectral coherence, on the right hand you have imaginary coherence. But the main message is that by including these features, by simply adding and enriching the feature space by including connectivity measurements, you can see that almost all the subjects, and in this case there were 20 subjects, exhibited an improvement of performance. Of course, for some subjects, the increment in terms of classification performance was very small, but for other subjects that can be really important. So these results, again, are only focusing on one specific band. That is to say, you have to perform the classification by considering different frequency band. But as you know, the brain actually presents multiple frequency, multiple oscillatory processes taking place at the same time. So here I'm representing this situation on the left of the screen, by showing that there is one brain, but actually you might have different brain networks coding the information at different frequency bands. And we call these networks, and we represent these networks as different layers. So actually, this means that the brain network has multiple layers, and we can decide to extract a new higher order properties of this network in order to extract different information that can be used to improve the performance. So rather than extracting single metrics, single properties for each single layer, we might want to describe the whole system. And the way you can do it is, and the way we did it, and these are preliminary results, was to refer into a recent field which is called multi-layer network theory, which exactly aims to model multi-layer networks. And in general, layers can be different frequency band, but you can think about also different neuroimaging modalities, like, for example, EEG, fMRI, or MEG. And we decided to focus on a metric that we call the interfrequency hardness, which basically quantify the tendency of each node in the network to facilitate the information propagation across different layers. In our case, across different frequency bands. So you can see that depending on the way the connections are distributed across the layers, across the frequency, then certain nodes might present from a theoretical perspective a higher diffusion properties than other nodes. And interestingly, we show that these properties is significantly modulating during the experiments that I have shown you before. That is to say, during the motor imagery of the hand, there are frontal and parietal regions that exhibit a decrease of these network properties, while other regions that are directly related and targeted by the BCI, like the standard motor areas, are not really impacted with respect to this metric. That is to say, actually, there is room to include these new properties that seems really to be complementary to what can be included by standard properties like the node degree or power spectrum density that typically are really significant for the motor area. So with that, before concluding, I would like to acknowledge the people that really conducted and did much of the work I've presented today: Mariko Stanz-Corsi and Tiziana Katai in the Aramis team, and the precious collaborations that we have with the United States and UK. And thank you very much for your attention.